Empty grocery shelves are everywhere. It's a major problem all across the nation, and consumers have been expressing their frustration with the lack of supplies and the soaring price of everything. In many stores across the country, people won't find anything in their meat cases, freezers, and shelves as grocers continue to struggle to get deliveries on time due to a global supply chain disruption fueled by the spread of the Delta variant in Asian countries, which have led Chinese authorities to shut down one of the most important ports for global trade, causing congestion of about 350 shipping containers. More than 1 year later, the health crisis continues to have an impact on the things Americans love to buy, even their favorite food, their cars, and their much-needed electronic equipment. In the stores, the shelves are often empty due to an increased demand for supplies, combined with shipping and manufacturing delays. It seems that dark clouds are gathering once again, threatening us with another period of extensive shortages and explosive prices. What we have seen from inflation so far was just a hint of what is coming next. This month, the U.S. inflation rate has reached levels not seen since 2008. Broken supply chains certainly have not helped with that equation. That means products people need and want are again in short supply. And we all have witnessed what happens when consumers hear that more shortages are coming. Since the beginning of the year, Americans have been facing a relentless rise in consumer prices, and even though politicians and policymakers have been trying to reassure us that those increases are only a temporary blip, it doesn't feel so reassuring to consumers who are seeing the prices for so many goods surging so much and so fast. Compared with the same time last year, consumer prices rose 5.6%. Leading the surge was the cost of vehicle rentals, which went up by a shocking 75% year on year, while the price of a new car was up 6.4% in the past year. That is the largest jump since 1982. Rents were also up, skyrocketing house prices, forcing many people to remain in their apartments. At the same time, restaurant prices increased by 0.8%, which may sound relatively small, but marked the largest increase since 1981. Industry analysts said this is happening because the costs of food and wages are much higher, and those increased costs are being passed to consumers. According to Kathy Bostianchitz, an economist at Oxford Economics, price increases stemming from the reopening of the economy and ongoing supply chain bottlenecks will keep the rate of inflation elevated. However, those who still believe the reopening will be translated into an economic recovery are set for disappointment, because the growing inflation is holding the recovery back, canceling out most of the benefits that workers might have expected from higher pay, and also increasing pressure on the Federal Reserve, which may have to hike interest rates sooner than expected to fight runaway inflation. At the end of 2020, the economy was expected to expand in 2021 at its fastest pace since the 1980s, but now all we can see are signs that it may be slumping again. While supply chain bottlenecks continue to dent manufacturing growth, consumer sentiment has sharply collapsed in recent weeks amid concerns about rising inflation. Already, higher prices are making it harder for people to afford the same products, and the latest reports show that retail sales fell more than expected in July due to shortages, increased prices, and the fact that the boost from stimulus checks has faded, suggesting a slowdown in economic growth early in the third quarter. Businesses across the United States are also growing less confident in the economic recovery, according to a survey released on Tuesday. On top of part and product shortages, as well as late deliveries, companies are facing labor shortages that have been compromising their ability to operate at full capacity. The National Federation of Independent Business Optimism Index dropped 2.8 points to a reading of 99.7 in July, erasing all of June's gain. Business owners are losing confidence in the strength of the economy and expect a slowdown in job creation. Bill Dunkelberg, the NFIB's chief economist, said in a statement. As owners look for qualified workers, they are also reporting that supply chain disruptions are having an impact on their businesses, Dunkelberg added. Ultimately, owners can only sell more and recover from the losses suffered in 2020 if they acquire more supplies and inventories from their supply chains, and if they have personnel to handle their product until it makes it to the shelves. But the strains they are currently facing illustrate the growing imbalances between supply and demand, and how the Fed's policies ended up making things worse by artificially fueling consumer demand without boosting manufacturing growth, resulting in shortages and resulting in elevated prices, and also creating a historic labor shortage at a time the economy desperately needs more workers. Almost 57% of businesses in the NFIB survey said they had few or no qualified applicants for open jobs in July. They also flagged inflation as a worry, 44% planning to increase prices in the next 3 months. Now that is a record high reading. Amongst them, restaurants have been the hardest hit by product shortages and inflation. According to a separate survey, nationwide, 46% of restaurant owners reported having a hard time getting all of the food and products they need from suppliers. The CEO for Cisco, that's a global distributor, wrote in a letter to its customers that demand has rebounded earlier and stronger than expected, there are labor and supply chain shortages, and that the volume of orders is regularly exceeding capacity, saying service has slipped and they're working to improve. In Portland, the owner of Mother's Bistro and Bar, Lisa Schroeder, revealed in an interview that even the most basic products such as lettuce and spinach have become impossible to find, and that companies are limiting how much she can buy and how often she can get it. It's just everywhere. We're just seeing shortages, she stressed. In every sector of the economy, shortages continue to erupt as the new virus outbreak messes with shipping, demand, supply, and all the other levers of global trade. One expert said the pervasive shortages are to last well into 2022. For automakers, the situation has been brutal, with about 17 auto factories in the U.S. being forced to halt production in recent weeks over the scarcity of semiconductors, according to Seraph Consulting, which is advising automakers on the shortages. General Motors had to stop making most of its full-size pickup trucks due to the lack of chips and parts. The great computer chip shortage of 2021 shows no signs of slowing, and it's leading to billions in losses in the automotive industry and raising the cost of consumer electronics. According to Intel CEO Patrick Gelsinger, it'll take another 1 to 2 years before the industry is able to completely catch up with demand. That is terrible news for consumers and manufacturers, but especially for car makers, because the computer chip shortage is limiting the supply of new vehicles at a time when used car prices are soaring. Anyone trying to buy a car right now knows how difficult it is to find one, and in face of all these factors, it's safe to say things are not going to get better anytime soon. Even Goldman Sachs said this week that new car inventories are unlikely to recover until the end of the year and will remain well below their pre-outbreak levels through the end of next year. The bank estimated that new car inventories will fall further this month to around 1 million vehicles. The firm also predicts that new car prices will continue to rise over the next few months, facing an additional 6% increase until the end of 2021. Meanwhile, Airlines are scrambling to find jet fuel, as demand for fuel has been strong since the Colonial Pipeline disruptions earlier this year. That shutdown affected the delivery of gasoline and jet fuel for weeks, and suppliers were not expecting a sudden rebound in demand for leisure and travel to happen this year. That's why now several U.S. airports don't have enough jet fuel, which is causing some flights to be cancelled and forcing airlines to add extra stops to fuel up on longer routes. Gasoline, for its part, is not in short supply. However, gasoline prices have soared to levels never seen before. In a recent interview, former president and CEO of Walmart, Bill Simon, warned we need to pay the most attention to gasoline prices to anticipate inflation's impact on consumer spending. Over the past year, the price of gasoline has gone on a meteoric rise and has soared by 42%. Given that goods need to be transported to make it to the stores, those higher costs will also be passed on to consumers. At this point, there's no end in sight for the rise in the price of gas, and there's nothing in the near term that looks to control the steady rise in prices in other consumer goods either. We still have a very challenged supply chain, as explained by Naveen Jaggi, the president of retail advisory service JLL. Many retailers don't expect any sense of a balanced supply chain recovery until the summer of 2022 or even later. Everything that's shipped in a container is going to cost more, Jaggi says, as he highlights that this is a global supply chain disruption. It's massive, from Bangladesh, South Korea, India, China, Europe, and the United States. The biggest challenge for U.S. consumers will be that demand will outstrip supply, he points out. And since retailers are facing acute supply shortages, they are being forced to make hard choices about where to fill store shelves and where to leave them bare. Most retailers ensure that their products get sent to the most dense shopping markets, so those secondary and tertiary markets will not have the full array of inventory. As a result, products will be available in some places and not in others. Shoppers are not going to get too excited for the holidays if there is no product in the stores, Jaggi cautions. Evidently, the supply chain crisis is just one of the factors contributing to the worsening of shortages all across the nation. America's many shortages of many different causes, ranging from domestic monetary policies, trade policies, aging infrastructure, and extraordinary spending in the wake of the health crisis. Many factors are also playing into this year's price hikes, and it's the convergence of all of them at a time when consumer demand is typically more elevated that is making business owners and retailers increasingly desperate as the holiday season approaches. At this point, we can only hope not to see a repeat of the chaotic waves of panic buying we've seen last year. But the truth is, we should all brace for empty store aisles, barren car dealerships, and depleted online inventories once again. Because everywhere you look, there's a new shortage. And as global events are starting to spiral out of control, from now on, things are only going to get worse.